Uh, I actually, it was really probably one of the best consultant gigs I had. I was over there, not in the sandbox, most of the time in service you end up over there with that, but I was there working with establishing the quality office for a multi-billion dollar government agency. It's called the Abu Dhabi Tourism, Tourism and a Culture Authority. And they're like the Smithsonian, about the same size, except they much more money. And we're about that. And the contractors over there are set up in a special area with restaurants, four-star hotels. They fly you back every 6 weeks. And the people over there are making hand over foot. They had my client. Actually, I had no client, no staff. We're waiting for the office we were going to put together for this organization, the quality office staffing and everything. I was getting $90,000 a month, tax free, basically doing nothing.
Yeah, it's a lot of money to be made over there. My family doesn't want me to go back over there, but I had no problems when I was over there. I've been over there even on vacation. You know, I enjoyed over there. Like I said, there's money over there to be made. So.
Yep. Right. And you'll find that a lot of your Air Force experience, just basically, how to figure out how to get things done, it will be very valuable. So.
Sure.
Yep. Let's see. Are you guys logged on? Are you where I got visual as well? Can you see the slides and webcam?
I don't know where the rest of our team is. I thought I saw Megan, but they know we're having it today because we tried to get Thursday in order to give us a little more time to get together, but we ended up keeping the original date, so they know we're supposed to be here.
I'm here. I just had a call in. I had a switch, so it may not show up. I'm here.
Was it Megan?
Yes.
Yeah, I saw you earlier. I saw you and then you disappeared.
Yeah, I had to get on my phone and call in.
Okay. I imagine folks are coming home, except for Dakota, who's probably been home for a while. Dakota.
Yeah, we're over at the base. We're still busy over at the base. I mean, even with the hurricane, everybody's cleaned up for the most part. But we got these GFRs and Korea's acting up, and we're attached to all of that over there too.
I hope what doesn't happen to you happened to my dad. He was a World War II veteran, and he had served his draft commitment, which was a year. And the day he was supposed to get out was December 8th, 1940.
Yeah, I'm in a panic also. The stop loss. I've seen it happen. A guy was supposed to have left that day, and we got to stop moving it, and then stop lost, and he ended up staying an extra 9 to 10 months.
Yeah. His brother was the same way. He had a job. He was going to retire, get out. He was in contracting in the Army, and he had been stationed in Kuwait and Egypt, and so he knew the land, and he was 30 days from retirement, and the Gulf War went up, so he found himself in the back of C-130 and the very first crew that went over there.
Yeah.
Buying 10,000 tents and buying, 10,000 of that, 10,000 of that. It was amazing. So, hi Megan, how you doing?
I'm doing good, just a little busy. We have ISO certification going on this week, so I've been tied up with that.
Oh, I bet. Yeah, but and you're the square middle of that, I would think, huh?
Yes, it's been really busy.
Oh, yeah. Well, we were just talking about ISO certification. Are you? Is this the actual certification visit or visit? Or?
We're actually going to be certified. We'll get our certification next year, so it's just a visit to make sure we're still in compliance with everything and using the appropriate standards.
Yeah. Are you using a particular? Is it the entire operations or?
Yes,
portion?
it's environmental, food safety, quality, and safety. So ISO 14,000, 22,000, all those fun ones.
Yeah, yeah. I remember when we first got started, there was a lot of overlap with the Baldrige criteria. A lot of the management techniques focus on improvements that have been incorporated in ISO. Quite an event. So, is it the entire week, or you have today and tomorrow?
It'll be actually the entire week.
Okay. I wish you well on it. Let me know how that turns out.
I sure will.
Okay. Let's see. Who we got? It looks like we got everybody except. Hello. Okay. Do you know if she's? I think. Can anybody contact her? Just be sure she's got the new sign in. And Judith, I just sent her. I think I'm not sure if she's usually on the initial invite, but does anybody have the capability to get a hold of those two and just let them know what the login and ID is? I'm recording this right now, and then okay, I just sent a message, and then somebody could just maybe send a text. I don't know how you normally communicate. So, any questions that did you guys have? The four of you that are on, three of you that are on.
I don't know. I'm pretty sure you've already looked at this, but if you look at the fishbone,
Yeah.
with our problem, there's just so many factors that affect that, and I don't know if we're going to have the time or even the resources to dig into all of those factors. You think we should break it down or concentrate on a specific area?
Yeah, yeah, we'll talk about that when we get there. You got a good start on it, and so we'll talk about some techniques, how to use it, maybe to focus in your project a little bit more tighter. But yeah, I did have a chance at a high level, and I hope everyone had the opportunity to take a look at the feedback comments I sent you on the last set of slides. I embed the comments in it, and so you can see kind of where it associates with this. And I've done the same thing with this slide deck. I'm going to send that back to you as other things that may not come up in our conversation tonight. But the comments also include recommendations for which slides that may be optional. And so I want you to get a nice tight presentation, and when you look at that, if it says optional on that, that means it's not required by the school, and you need to kind of consider whether you want to include it in your presentation. because next time when we have Master Business Process 2, you're going to have about a 30-minute brief where each one of you participates or at least provides comments and insights on this, and it takes about 30 minutes. So it makes you consider what's really important and what to be concise, and then how you tell your story. Now, it's just a heads up, which will be class after next. I think you got your benchmarking with Professor Jones coming up, and then we're back together one more class. And
Okay.
I saw you how to start, put in the DMAIC model. I'll talk a little bit about that as well. And so, does anyone have success getting the other members of the team?
I think Matthew said he sent them a message, and we haven't heard anything back from him yet.
Okay. All right, and I'll record this session. I'm not going to delay it much longer. I think we will go ahead and get started with you guys, and then they can join in as we have opportunity. Again, as we go through these, the conversations, whatever questions you have, let me then kind of go through the first part of this and cover some of the slides we talked about last time, and talk about whatever refinements on that, and then we'll head into the new territory of Fishbone and the Pareto that you have. All right. Okay. Let's see. Let me just also say it here at the very beginning. What we'll do tonight is that make notes, make refinements to this slide deck. And then what you'll do, you put this into the tracker. This is going to be one of the ones that you want to, this will be your baseline document that you'll start to use. That will be consistent for Master Business Process 2, be the baseline for that, and the baseline for your Master Business Process 3, which is your final presentation. And so sequencing and use of the DMAIC is going to be important. You need to intertwine what you're going to say and go through that. This is going to be a primary. You certainly have this included in there. It looks like Judith is joining us. This one, a little background information is always good to have, but I don't dwell on it a lot. Basically, just kind of tell the mission as you go through. This one here is an optional one. It's background information. You may just, instead of reading this, and if you have anything that you're going to provide information on, keep it to bullets so that you talk, present in bullets, and then what you have on the slide should be, the main points of your bullets. But this one will be an optional one, as I mentioned before. Welcome, Judith. Do you have your ears on?
You said this is slide 4. You said it's optional. Is it a good idea to have that in there?
Yeah. Here's what, as I mentioned, you're going to have to make a decision on, is that you're going to be faced with having more slides developed throughout the courses than you can present. And so you're going to have more in addition from the other classes. I mean, this is just a little bit over, halfway where you are, so you're going to add additional ones. And so if you got 30 minutes, you got 30 slides, that's a minute per slide. So if you think about that, what you're going to do is I want you, as we go through this, and the Master Business Process 2, I'm going to be listening to, here's the problem statement, here's how we use the problem statement to scope our problem, and as we go through all that. Then you say, here's what we collected data based on our problem statement, customer requirements, et cetera. So you have an integrated discussion about that. But you're going to have certain slides are actually mandatory for you to be successful, that we want to be sure you know how to use at a minimum. And so if any of these are marked optional, then you as a team need to decide when you want to include it in your briefing, and if so, what are you going to say and how much time. Where you want to spend the majority of your time will be in your final set of recommendations and telling about what you recommended, what's the results of that. And so you want to be sure that as you focus and go through your story, is that you ensure you have enough time allocated, particularly in the data analysis and your set of recommendations, and then what you're going to do to what we call the control phase is what are the things you're going to suggest for the champion to use to monitor the project, to review it in a way to ensure that you sustain the gains and that they achieve the targets that you think they should. And so all of that is upcoming. And teams have a tendency to dwell too much on the very beginning of this because it's nice to know about the organization, a little background on, particularly for new factories to go through, but that's not what we're testing you on. What you really want to show is your academic excellence and explaining how tools are used, how you use the Domaic process, how each one of these. And what you should do for each one of these things in here, the way you should present it and say, okay, here's our customer requirements matrix, for instance. And what you would do then is say, here's the purpose of the customer requirements matrix. It identifies the external customers of this process. They're the ones that the reason this organization exists and are very important to understanding the scope of our problem. And we've captured their requirements here. Okay. Later on, we'll show you how we collected data around these requirements. Okay. So that type of thing, where you introduce the tool, talk a little bit about its purpose, and then talk to the data that you had in collecting that or putting it together, and say, okay, here's the purpose of the tool, and then here it pertains to our project. So that does two things. One, it assures the faculty that you know how to use all these various approaches and tools, and that you're using it in not only an appropriate way, but you understand the linkages between them. And so that's what we'll be looking for. So explanation of the tool and then that. And then I want to talk a little bit about sequencing of things, what makes a good flow. Let's start with your Domaic, real quick. And you got, I think, one chart in here that you've included, and let me go to that one. Okay. So what do we do in the define phase in your own words? Anybody can maybe describe what you think in what occurs in the define phase? What's the purpose of define in the Domaic model?
I think first and foremost is the problem, the issue. Define what the problem is, or what you think the problem is.
Okay. Okay. It defines it. Okay. You got a problem statement. That's one of the important things. Okay. Anybody else add a few things into that? Anybody want to add on to that?
You also want to define the problem. Who does it affect? Like your stakeholders, your customers.
Okay. Yeah. Remember that for project management? Yeah. All that things goes in the initiating phase. It's very you take a lot of stuff out of the project management stuff and go right. So you identify, well, who's involved, and really you're defining the problem, which is that, and scope. In other words, what's included, what's excluded, what's the focus of the project. And that really is what the purpose in the define phase while we use this process map, okay? Because in the define phase, the process map is helping you to describe graphically the scope of the problem or the scope of the project. We're working this type of aircraft, and here's our start point, and here's our end point. Okay, we're not looking at regularly scheduled maintenance. We're looking at only unscheduled maintenance here. We're looking at whether warehouses are, and as you can see, this is what departments are involved, and here's our start point, end point, and its purpose at this point, like this process map, is for scope. So you should introduce it and talk a little bit about what's included, excluded, scope of the project. That's the important part in the define phase. Later on in the measure phase, you can use the same chart. And that's why a macro flow chart, with just a few steps, often is very good to be used here. This is fine, what you have. But the other purpose then in the measure phase is to use your process map to say, okay, we started to evaluate areas that we can measure, okay? And they say, okay, like wherever we had a diamond, we started to collect diamond on why things didn't improve or why the tool wasn't available at the time it should have been. Or we looked at decisions that were made about ordering and what took time. So what you use the process map then, later on in the measure phase as well, you can use it to help figure out cycle time. You can look at rework. You can look at how many steps are in the process, how much time each one of those steps took. And so it has a different purpose than in the measure phase. And so I'm just talking about that. So defining what the problem is, what the champion wants, right? That's your problem statement. What the customers want, that's what the CRM is about, the customer requirements matrix. And so you're just identifying the needs, what success looks like for the project. The SIPOC is also describing that. It's a very high level view of your project. It shows, what's included. It's like a 1/50,000 view of your project. So that's why it's in the define phase. So when you go through, and this is what I'm looking for, and it'd be good for you in addition to having this model here, is whoever briefs it, who introduces it, you talk about the methodology, what's its purpose, how it's used, and then you may want to include on each slide, you have kind of like, okay, here's where I start, measure, and then our define phase, and we go all the way to this slide, and we go to that. Or another way you can do that is just by putting like a little indicator on top of your slide. This is associated with the define, and then it's very clear which slide belongs to what, so you have a clear focus with that. Now, back on the define phase, and having said that, you got a couple things in here. So force field analysis, talks about the risk. SIPOC, we talked about stakeholders, okay, who's involved, CRM. So, and you also have data collection and stakeholder survey, okay? Why do you have that in the define phase, do you think?
Not sure. I think maybe that should be in our measure phase, or measure or analyze.
Yeah, I'm not sure why those are in there. That's a good question.
Okay. All right. How many vote for measure? Raise your hands.
Hands raised.
Okay. Anybody for analyze?
Yes,
Your
because
hands
we're
down.
analyzing the data, right? No, sir?
All right. So, yeah, really, for those who raise your hands for measure, you're correct. Because that's what the data collection is. Data collection is what you're going to do to, and that should be the very first slide for your data collection. That's the header slide for that. And then out of your data collection, you'll have, here's what we're doing for a survey, here's what we're doing to collect, information from DPAS or whatever the system is that's being used to collect information about parts, and here's all that type of stuff. So here, I need to revisit this, okay? And let me just talk about sequence of things. I want you to have a flow, okay? And think about, first thing you got to do is introduce a little bit of information about yourselves, then a little bit about the champion organization, talk about who your champion is, and then what you want to do is you introduce the DMAIC model, okay? But then you really want to kind of give, a picture about scope and discuss this. And if you look at it, for instance, in your SIPOC, which is a big picture view, right? You cover everything on here, suppliers, input, process, output. And what's this last line in here?
Can you see it?
Yeah, it's customer.
Customer.
Right?
Oh,
Customer.
Yeah, so you got customer in there, and so it's a good transition to say, okay, here's the SIPOC, here's all those involved, and then let me let us take you into a little bit deeper about what those customers' requirements are. Okay, and so it's kind of a natural flow of that, you know, and so, okay, here's what the customer's requirements are. Now, what you need on here, and I think we may have talked about it before, this has been kind of updated, I think, since MB last time I was with you, is that you want to associate requirements to the customer groups that you've got listed on the SIPOC. You know, mechanics and the maintainers and all these folks have a different set of requirements. For instance, and the mechanics need it, you know, the maintainers, I guess is what they're called here, is that, you know, they need the tool at the time it's needed when it's there. But if you're ordering parts, you know, you may have interactions with the warehouse and you got that customer relationship there. And it may be different for the one whoever's doing the ordering versus the mechanic. It may be one and the same person, but the requirements you want to associate with your customer groups. So that's why the CRM is always good to list. And I know NGS, and this is something we always talk about, and a lot of the models don't have another column that says customer, but you should talk to it and say, here's what these folks' requirements are, okay? Because the guys and gals that actually fly around in this aircraft have a little different set of requirements than the folks who are working on it. And so as you cover the requirements in the SIPOC, associate it very clearly and closely with the folks that you've got listed here. So customer requirements and SIPOC, that's a good thing. And then you talk about the scope of your project, which you have here. I think we've talked some about this, but one of the things I want to go back to the problem statement, which is earlier on. Okay. All right. And I think we talked about this. Let me sure if we got this right. The entire amount of time for downtime is more than 24 hours for aircraft, right? Is that correct?
I think that there's a problem, but it's not really the problem because we could have one aircraft down for more than 24 hours. Is the amount of aircraft. Since we only have 9, if we've got 2 down, then we're not meeting our MC rate standard.
Yeah.
Mission capable standard, which is 86, I believe. And if we've got 2 down, then we fall into 70 or 68 or 70, something like that.
So the 24 hours, is that based on some data that you have, or is that kind of a swag?
Yeah, swag, some kind of a preference, somebody's preference.
Okay. All right. Yeah. And so that would be one of the things that, you know, that you may want to maybe convert amount of X hours due to unscheduled maintenance. You think you can get to that number? In other words, what portion of the entire non-mission capable time are parts that, you know, what portion do the not having parts, available parts, contribute to that?
Okay.
So if anything that's a swag or an estimate, you want to be able to be sure that you can say, okay, we're refining that in our data collection. And this rest of this, your focus in narrowing the focus, and this is typically what you do in this approach, by the way, is that you go from the global, you bring it down to the specific, and you keep refining it and trying to narrow it to what the focus of the project is. And so smaller, a better focus, more a succinct one is better for you. And you really are focusing in on non-availability of parts, right, for unscheduled maintenance. And
sure.
you want to, yeah. And so don't leave anything in here because you talk about fully mission capable, and just kind of be very succinct about, hey, we're working on that, and it will contribute to the overall, you know, amount of hours that we'll be able to decrease the reasons for downtime for non-availability of parts, and that's going to be your goal. Whatever that number is, because we really don't want that know that number is until you start looking at what's possible, you know, and understanding how much is being of non-available parts are contributing to the overall delay or to downtime is really your scope. So That's the way I kind of understand it. Is that the way you guys understand it? Or tell me if I'm incorrect.
Yes, yes, sir. That's about right.
Okay. All right. And so in the define phase, this is an optional chart, listing all the things. You already talked about this, but later on, if you want to talk about it and about who you're going to do your survey and introduce it there, that'd be very appropriate. But I wouldn't have again, when you duplicate, you're going to have some things. When we look at force field analysis and your risk mitigation in here, you had a bullet about resistance to new processes. And migrate through shared participation, such as getting them involved, basically, is how I read that. And so when you do your data management collection, you think about who do I need to include in the data collection to ensure get their buy-in as well. So that's another way to look at this chart and say, okay, and then you got a risk here. You talk about data collection itself. Serve the purpose in this. So we'll talk about, back on your chart here, what are your challenges? Did you do any updates to this? What was the updates to this since our last discussion on the data collection plan?
Don't know if there was any updates done to this slide. I think if it was any updates done in, we put in specific dates.
Yeah. Yeah, because it looks like you got all your data collected except for this one here, right?
Sure.
Okay. So, do you have what's the current status? Have you been able? Is there any data that in electronic form that's been able to be shared with the team at this point?
There is some data out there. But the person that's in control of that database is on leave. It's high vacation season. So, and I'm waiting for them to come back. Nobody else has access to that database.
When do you think next week or when?
Supposed to the end of the first week of next month.
Oh, okay. And what type of data is that?
I think it was how they were tracking the parts that come in. They had time frames on the parts and locations where we got it from, whether it was in the supply system or if it was vendor controlled, and how it was delivered. Just a lot of how the parts get here, basically, and how long it takes them to get here.
Okay. That's really a vital set of data there, right?
It is.
Okay. Now that's a high risk. Is there? And you don't think you're going to get it? And see how many more weeks before you be able to eyeball that?
But I'm thinking I can go to another unit because they're going to use the same database. They'll be tracking different aircraft, but I'm seeing if it's the same database that they might be able to pull our data up also.
Okay. Yeah, I would. Whatever. The first thing is any of the data that you can share amongst yourselves, and get a report written off, and then hopefully it's in Excel or something like that, or a text file or something that you can all be shared with. Get that as soon as you can, and try whatever sources. And I would recommend even talking to Champion if you need this data, because right now that seems like it's going to have a lot of the information, right, that you have on this list. And so you really want to have some urgency about getting that. And then when you get that list of things, okay, what are you going to be looking at then on that? So you're going to be looking at several things, right? How long did it take, what locations? Who's going to do the analysis on that? Have you guys decided amongst yourselves?
Not yet.
Okay.
No, I think we haven't really decided I think we might all look at it and then try to go from there.
Okay. Yeah. Because I would suggest that as much as you can, if you're waiting on something, that's one of the deadly sins of lean, by the way, wait time, is that see what else you can fill in. Maybe start look, and then let's talk about the survey. Let's see, is there any other information out there that you could get? Is there an airframe currently in the unscheduled maintenance and the status, or more than one?
No, most of our aircraft are deployed or working missions. I think we've got 2 on station right now.
Okay. All right. So they're not going through any unscheduled maintenance at this point.
We have one this next month. We'll be going into scheduled maintenance. It has an ISO phase due.
Okay. All right. But the focus of yours is just on unscheduled maintenance, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So if one of the things then is then you've got if you get to that database now, the warehouses you go to, are you on a working relationship with them as well? You know, the folks where they have to go get the parts.
Directly, I'm not. We use our COSO, and basically COSO is the middleman between us and the supply.
Uh-huh.
And then the warehouse, that's just where if we order parts, they go to the warehouse and they store them. And then they have a pickup and delivery from another unit that goes to the warehouse, picks these up, and they bring them back, and then they deliver them out.
Okay. Well, you know, where we can get to, you know, if there's delivery folks, you know, there's parts going in and out. Even if you can't, in other words, if they can't pull up your data or the part that you want, see what you can. And maybe if it's even representative of the data that you can from their account,
Yes,
so you can share it with the team so you can get your heads wrapped around what the data looks like, how it's formatted, and how you want to turn it into some type of charge, because a lot of this is going to be about time, probably from the time, you know, part was identified as a need. So you go back to your flow chart, you know, to the time that the part was ordered, from the time the order came in, and then was there any category of parts that came in that were unserviceable, incorrect, you know, et cetera.
I've known, just see what you think of this concept. We have we call a 12-hour fix rate. That will identify, okay, the aircraft is broke, but we don't put it in the non-mission NMC status. We got 12 hours to get it fixed. If it goes beyond that 12 hours, then we put it into NMC, where we break it, we hard break it. It's broke, but it's not broke.
Okay. Well, yeah, then you can even separate your data by that stratification, you know, how much is in that first, you know, element, how many is in NCM, you know,
Sure.
Yeah, so that makes sense. So the other thing then I would like for you to do is that operationalize this plan. This should be for your internal planning amongst the 5 of you, and say, okay, what's the data, and update these dates about not only when you're going to get the data physically, and put in estimated dates when you're going to get that, so you keep reminding yourself. But then when do you want to have the analysis done? This will force you to think through and kind of backward plan, because as I mentioned, you probably by November want to have pretty much of your analysis fairly complete. And so that's going to take a little bit. Once you get it, you know, you're going to be scratching your heads, figuring out what charts, how you're going to display it. You have some discussion. So there's iterations of that. And so, so put those dates in here. When do you think you're going to get it? And then I would suggest that you may also then task force yourself who's going to be looking at what. All right. So can you tell me what you're thinking about around this survey? What's the purpose of your survey? And first of all, what's the goal of the survey? And then how do you plan to go about making it happen?
Well, we did one. survey.
You did.
Yeah, Judith, we sent questions to Judith, and we had that sent out, and then Jay got the results for us and their feedback, and we've looked over that, and then I'm actually working on getting some questions together so I can call the commander and ask him some questions as well.
Okay. Okay. What you want to then include is here. You've already got that information now, right? Because you have a slide after this, okay? And so here's the initial questions, and you describe the methodology that you used, okay? In other words, we developed X amount of questions. The purpose of these questions were, what type of information did you get from these questions back?
Me looking at the information, the answers to the questions, we got an idea of how the champion, the day-to-day champion, what they were expecting and where they saw problems being, some of what they would like to see happen to resolve the problems.
Okay. All right. So were they? And how was your response to that? What was the, you get a lot back, or what was your evaluation of what you got back?
We didn't get a lot of detail because of their position and then the nature of this, dealing with contractors. They've got to be careful. We have to be careful.
Okay. And was that one of the things they told you?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's good to know. All right. So here's what you would have for this, because you already got some data collected, is you have a chart summarizing, here's the type of questions we had, here's who we sent it to, here's the response level we got, okay? And then what you have is, you discuss that data, what it meant, any takeaways, how did it maybe change your thinking about how you approach your project, whatever that might be. A lot of times also, if you're doing a survey or some type of feedback system, they're very good to take those comments and maybe use them to help when you do your fishbone diagram to say, okay, here's some key elements, root causes. We may have some vendor issues, we noticed on that. We're going to be limited to getting to that, but that then becomes part of that discussion. And then you say, okay, this is how we use that information from the survey. We used it to help populate our fishbone diagram, look at our root causes. We think, this may be an issue, may not be an issue, but there are some things we have to consider with that. And so you discuss it. So that's kind of the technique. You say, okay, here's the survey. And then it looks like you're doing it. And now, am I understanding this right? Is that you plan on doing another survey or another questionnaire or interviews, it sounds like?
Meeting with the champions, sir. We're trying to set up a meeting to hear.
Interviews, huh?
Yes, sir.
Okay, what's your plan to prepare for that?
This is a question that we brainstormed it, I think last Sunday. And from the questions that came out from the brainstorming session, that's what Megan will put together the questions and send them via email, and we will also contact them by phone to see what time will be best. So sending them the questions like the talking points and getting their feedback from the questions, and then when we talk to them, we'll have some talking points, some things to talk about. And we're also going to ask them to send back those answers, and then so we will be able to go through them with them.
Okay. Okay. And then you have a class coming up, as I mentioned, benchmarking. You're going to have a survey component in there and also interviews. And one of the, the tips is that you usually don't ask in interviews anything that you can obtain through a document. In other words, if the data is already contained in some type of data document, you want to clarify and get further explanation, maybe why it exists. So really use your FaceTime. And have you decided how long you're going to have the interview and how you're going to go about that?
We said we will go we will do a teleconference type meeting.
Yeah. Good. Okay. All right. And how do you, okay.
No more than 30, 45 minutes, maybe an hour. We haven't set up the time yet. That's one of the questions we will, when we contact them by phone, we will ask the champion and day-to-day champions, like what their schedule looks like and the timing, or whether or not it's good for them to do 30 minutes or an hour. We would prefer an hour.
Yeah. Yeah, and so these type of things, which you're now laying out, you know, the plan for your survey, you want to be able to say, okay, you know, have here when you talk about when you're going to, because it sounds like June, you know, maybe you had first thing going, but then the October timeframe is, you know, be very specific in there because you have to schedule this up, you have to coordinate. I always usually try not to go more than an hour just because of attention span. But it also forces you to be concise. And usually, how many questions do you have? Do you know?
Not yet, so we haven't reviewed the questions.
Okay. Yeah, because one of the things that you have to be when you get in there, typically, you know, you start some broad questions. Here's particular areas, questions that you want to look at. But then you also want to have some flex because usually then you want to kind of pursue things and always kind of think about the 5 whys. You know, what's their opinion about why this is, or what are the areas they recommend that you explore, and so you're capturing that data, and then think about how you're going to display it, because when you take your notes, if you can do it verbatim, somebody's going to be taking notes, be sure that responsibility is done. Then after you kind of bring it together, you may want to go back, and often your fishbone diagram is a very good tool. Even think about when you do your surveys and say, what are the questions, you know, around each one of these issues if they really are important. So even the topics, sometimes these tools would be helpful for you to use in describing that survey. Okay. All right. So it sounds like if you do it in October, then you'll have then some results of that interview, and then you'll be able to, you know, take it to the bank and maybe pursue that, whatever data may be from that. Okay. So if you would, this one again should be a living document. Look at the, you know, adding of this, and then maybe lay this thing out to talk about when you're actually going to have the data kind of analyzed as well. And then if you anticipate any problem getting to that data, this is something you need to get identified like really upfront. Because otherwise, you may have to maybe do interviews like with the maintainers and say, what's your experience? What's the top parts that you think were missing? And maybe collecting data from a number of folks that actually did the work. Now, it may not be as helpful as the approach that we have here, where you actually collect an off report, but at least it'll be something that you can use. So you want to have kind of a fallback plan just in case you can't get to the automated system, or there may be issues with that being shared outside of that. So be sure you explore that. There's no problem with, you know, this being shared within the group as well. And but be sure you identify that up front. Okay. Any other comments on the either the survey or other data collection intents on that? Okay. Let me see. Let me check my thing here. Okay. Let me just continue on then. And I want to talk about your fishbone and your okay, let me just go through the comments. Okay. This one here, work breakdown structure, WBS. I love it. But it's not required. This will be an optional one. Okay. You really don't what you want to do, and then all that is talk to the actual process, include your description of how you do it, because what you want to cover whenever you do your data collection, you want to talk about how you developed it, you know, who you interviewed with the data, and reinforce back to the champion that, you know, you collected data from the workforce and this is the voice of their people coming back. And you talk about your survey, which is good. You also tighten this thing up. If you already got to register, survey's in progress, okay, fine, I use the status, but you actually want to have the real results in that. And then what's this one about the QC and QA? Why is this in here? What was your intent?
Not sure with that one.
Seemed like a good idea at the time. Okay, got it, thanks. Yeah, if things that you want to put into notes, in other words, things that help you in your narrative, use the notes feature in the PowerPoint. You know, when you do your slides, you can add notes at the bottom, briefing notes. And this for Matthew will be the primary means for your briefing, is that as we go through, Polly will be looking at the view, you know, we'll be looking at the this part down here, which is the notes feature. In other words, your slides, then you can have your narrative about what you're going to brief into here. And certainly in Matthew's case, you can do that. And that will be your portion as we go through that discussion. So if there are things that you have in your slides, it's kind of like background or explanations, you can make use of that, and that's perfectly acceptable. Okay. Let me get back to where we were. Okay. So now this is where when you have a break here, and we talked about the sequence of this, is that your process data collection, the Pareto chart, fishbone diagram, and the benchmarking is kind of a boundary spanner, actually. You should have your current state pretty well documented. You should know what you want to be looking at. In benchmarking, they'll be talking about enablers, those things that will be particularly important. Maybe it's another organization that has a very good record on parts, you know, receipt of parts on hand. But basically, it's also analysis. And the reason it's analysis is that because you are now comparing your process with another unit, or with an outside industry, or an industry standard, or maybe another organization that's completely generic. It not necessarily be another aircraft maintenance organization, and maybe on the outside, maybe an auto repair or anything else that has to do with parts. So you can then kind of say that benchmarking may be a part of the analyze as well as the measure. So it'll be included here. It'll be following your data collection. You show all the data that you collect and analyzing that. Okay, here's your non-mission capable. What we hope to achieve out here, because this has got all the non-mission capable time. Now and then here, number and length of the NBC events per aircraft. But this isn't just parts, is it here? Is that correct, Jay?
It's not.
Yeah. Okay. So your problem statement kind of leads me to believe that, you know, 24 hours relating to parts. This one looks like that's, you know, the number of 24 hours events greater than that. So if you can figure out what part of the why the thing isn't being repaired at the time that it should be, and how much of that's due to parts, that'd be a great one to have in here, because it shows the scope and the degree of that. So let me ask you about Mr. Pareto here. Did you do this? Did you review it all as a team? What was? Did you have any challenges? What was the problems? Did it come together really quickly for you? Just talk to me a little bit about this chart.
Yeah, I think D, all of the above.
I'll second that, sir.
What was that, Judith? What was that? I didn't catch the first part of Jay's comment.
Yeah, I was saying everything that you said, D, all of the above.
Okay.
Yeah, some of the information that's on here is not matching other information that we have. Just kind of put it together, and we didn't talk about it.
Okay. All right. So, what's the purpose of this Pareto chart here? How would you use a Pareto? How do you plan on using the Pareto, other than getting passing grade and get through the course? How would you use it in the context of the project?
To define the problem, to kind of lay it out and see, kind of like that, to visualize the problem and laying out, okay, this is what the problem was. We're trying to cut out the time. So we lay out the difficulty that we've encountered throughout, regarding to getting the parts. So in trying to visualize it, we're trying to see, okay, where the biggest problem lies. And from that on, what's the next level of problems that we've had? And so which ones we can attack the best way, the best course of action in regards to resolving it.
Okay. So it provides you a little bit more focus about, what the problem is and where it lies. Okay. Other thoughts? That's good, Judith. Thanks. What else does Mr. Pareto help you do? Narrow scope, okay, which kind of another way what Judith brought up, focusing on what's most important. Okay. Be sure that what's the rule that applies here? Anybody remember?
The 80-20?
There you go. Okay. So when you describe this tool, let's talk about the 80-20%. Okay. All right. And so you want to introduce that. So what's 80-20? Can anybody put that in their own, what does that mean? And why is that an important concept? So, Mr. Pareto, and we'll use this, let me get back to that other chart. Okay. So this is what we want to do. Be sure you review the definitions, take a look at the Nancy Tegg book about, what the purpose is. You introduce a discussion about it, 80%, 20-80% rule, right? Okay. So how would you describe this? And where is the 80%ers? In other words, what are the 80% of the causes of why you don't have parts? Why are you waiting parts? How would you brief this? What would you say? How would you brief this chart and say, okay, around the 80% concept?
As we try to dig down into the root cause of the problem, sir?
Yeah, that certainly contributes to root cause, and you're trying to identify with the most important ones, the 80%, the most important ones, right? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
I would say the backlog in the warehouses, because as Jay was saying, as he was explaining the fact that we have a middleman in order to get those parts from the warehouses.
Yeah.
I think there should be a better way of doing that.
Okay. The warehouses, okay. And now let me. So this red line here, what happened there? Did you just run your red pen ink over it and kind of went up, kind of scratched it over, or what does that represent?
This one, waiting for parts that are back ordered, has the greatest impact on us being non-mission capable.
Okay. Yeah, here's a tip. Okay, go ahead. Anybody else want to take a shot? Okay. All right. So when you brief it, okay, you talk about all the things that Jay's just brought up, you know, and Jay, and say, okay, we identified causes, we identified the, you know, the amount that they contribute, but you need to also, in addition to talk about the 20% type of concept, is, as this chart indicates by this cumulative line here, where does the 80% cross this? See the 80% here? Right there? What do you do?
Okay.
Right.
Yes, sir.
All right. So you say, and what's going to be helpful for you is put a visual, put a little marker or an 80% or an arrow, you know, a graphic where which columns are underneath it. So when you brief it, you want to say, okay, for instance, as you can see, our 80% are these first three columns here. The tall poles, another term often used, are underneath the 80%, which is here, okay? So we're going to focus our project on these three main areas, okay, as the principal root causes that we're now going to see if we can improve those areas, which might be a way to brief this. And now what you've done is shown of all the many, which one's the really vital few, and that you're now narrowing the focus, as you know, the word you said, defining it, and to the most important categories. Now, whether this is, you know, wait time for parts, is waiting on delivery, you know, which one's reordered, and you get whatever that might be. But now the focus of your project is going to be on these three things which are under the 80% line. So as you brief this is how you introduce it, and then you talk to the data, and then you'll show us then, okay, here's how then we're going to focus on these three key areas and show you what we think might be the reasons why parts are back ordered and this. So it helps to figure out the data you want to collect now. So you may have then, when you go back to your data chart, okay, if this is actually what the data is telling us, you go back in and say, okay, now why is that? And you start applying that root cause analysis. Why are this area and that type of area? Okay, does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Graphically, this is done right. Conceptually, it's done correctly. The only thing I would recommend is you add and then add in your narrative in here. How are you going to explain this using the concepts? And it's a very powerful tool, and it's actually going to then give you a logical flow, okay, of all the stuff that's out there. Like you mentioned at the very beginning, there's a lot of things that cause issues about non-mission capable and not having parts and et cetera. Now you're trying to focus in on the ones that are most important. So this is a very good thing. Any questions about the Pareto, either in its development or the future use of it?
Your explanation greatly helped, sir. Thank you.
Okay. So it's not rocket science, but the biggest thing is that you guys need to come agreement about what are these categories, okay? And just think about this. Think about the data you want to collect, and then if you can say, how am I going to break that down? Which one's going to be, you know, by hours? Because sometimes if the database, when you get it, for instance, you're using hours to capture things here, right? But if it comes to you and it's in days, you're going to have to go back and revisit this. Now, if they have date timestamps of when things were ordered, in other words, the whatever system is being entered, it will show, you know, 10 a.m. and the part was arriving at 12 a.m., whatever that is, then you can say, okay, that's a 2 hour. But if you look at the data and say, oh, it doesn't have hours on here at all, you're going to be looking at days or portions of the days, or, you know, so how you display and what you use to normalize this data. So you look at the raw data, you go back and you start thinking through those things. Okay. So good job on here, but let's see if we can get to the real thing. Okay. Purpose here. All you fishermen of quality, okay. What fish is it? That's for a trout. Doesn't have any whiskers, not a catfish. So, all right. So how'd you come about this one? Tell me a little bit about the fishbone and how did you develop this? What was the process?
The fishbone looked at what was the problem. Our problem was the main problem was NMC aircraft, non-mission capable aircraft, because of parts. Maybe I could have elaborated more with that on the end. But then you have all your factors, your main factors to that problem, or your areas. And then the factors in those areas that contribute to the problem, like you have your maintainers training. Are they trained to order? Do they know how to order the parts? Are they ordering the right parts? Do they know how to read the manuals to order the parts? Mechanical ability. Can they get the part? Do they know how to put it in correctly and not break it where we've got to order another part? You go to COSO, again, training. Do they know how to, they're the middleman. Do they know how to communicate between the customers and the supply entity? Manning, we only have a day shift COSO. So if we order stuff on swing shift or mid shift, we've got to wait for them to come back in the morning before we can process it.
Yeah. You don't have to walk through all of it, but you're on the right track. So let me ask you a process question, team. Of the survey that you have, do you have any questions in there about training?
I don't think so. I don't recall one.
No, sir.
All right, good. Any questions about the perception of the, has this been a common error? In other words, how will you find that out, whether or not you got the right part, all right, just don't have the right person with the right knowledge putting it on, or you have the right person, just doesn't have the knowledge. And so, part of ISO normally audits is you're looking at process capability, and one of that is also whether or not the people who are in the process are capable. So that's a very good thing. So you think about this again as a tool to help you figure out, maybe refine your data collection. So how am I going to get to that information if I don't currently know it? And it may be a very subjective thing on a scale of 1 to 5, how much, you think is this issue around training and mechanical capability, and you ask maybe some of the chiefs or some of the supervisors, maybe the maintainers themselves. And so that's very good from, that you've laid this out in this way. Could get a lot of stuff on it, right? And did any of your interview data or the survey data you did with the folks you sent the previous emails out and got the questions back, anything in here that you can use that goes into this fishbone?
Maybe, sir. We'll have to review those answers we received, and definitely that's the question we can ask. We can add to our list of questions about the training, and I think that's something we always take for granted that the mechanics or whomever fixing trucks or whatever it may be, that they will be fully trained.
Okay. First of all, you got a good start, and you got you kind of a mix of categories, okay? And so this will give you a pretty broad. Now, and it's good to have a lot of ideas about what's contributing. Now, remember your problem statement. You need to tie this in and be sure you stay focused, because as the theme here is that you're not fixing non-mission capable all that time for the aircraft. You're looking at parts non-availability, particularly. So it's better in where you got the head here underneath the eye, eyeballing this thing here, it's actually kind of put your problem statement, causes of non-available parts for okay. So it's very clear that you're not generating causal factors for all the other ones, but just on the parts. And so it stays focused. Now, what's on your fishbone? Okay, is there some that are more meaty issues, you think, than the rest? Are some of these, you think, causing bigger issues or contributing to 80% than the rest?
Yes, sir.
What might they be? Just one or two examples.
The warehouse.
Okay.
A lot of times they get parts in that we've ordered and they store them, but they don't have a process. I just learned this within the day or two of how they store them. They'll get one in and they'll put it somewhere, and then another part will come in 2 or 3 days later, but they store them in the same area, so there's no prioritization of which part should be going out first.
Okay. Yeah, first in, first out, and that may not be a good system, right? Sometimes it should be what's most important, what's needed immediately. But if they're doing first in, first out, that may be a conflict of requirements. So, okay. Now, what a suggestion is, when you not only do you ask questions about what goods should go on this, as you have, and then you get a lot of inputs, hopefully from the people that are involved in the process, not just you guys sitting around, on the phone, brainstorming this. Talk to the process, who you interviewed, what the information you used in here. We as a team generated initial fishbone diagram. Then we also took, this gave us further inspiration to go talk to particular individuals who brought their inputs in. Here's kind of what they said about that. And now, other thing, when we talked to them as well, we got a feel for maybe what's most important, which ones are contributing in a greater degree to the non-availability of the parts. And the way you do something like that is that you could take a color, right, and color code ones that may be outstanding, or maybe you draw a box around them or with some type of additional graphic and say, okay, of all the causes, they're all not equal. These are maybe the areas we think are most important. And then you can do something like this. You can show, okay, here's the data in behind these areas we think is most important. So that you then say, okay, we got warehouse issues, and then here's what we found in the warehouse, X, Y, Z. They don't have this, and there's so much wait time. Here's a number of parts that we ordered that were on delay, and this is the result. So you can then use these in conjunction with each other. And then of these here, be sure you ask yourselves and of the champions and of the people involved in the process, which one do you think is the biggest or the most contributor of this? And sometimes your data will tell you which ones are. In other words, which ones are the big issues. So a lot of times this is a very good way to use these two tools in conjunction with it. Here's what we got verbally, tribal knowledge, right? This is what people say was the biggest problem. Here's the opinions of the champion, the folks. And then we went out and collected some data on here to validate what we found out. And here's what we did. We made a Pareto that showed, yep, indeed, here were the biggest causes. So using these in conjunction with each other is a very good tool. You did it. I mean, this is structurally correct, except for I would put the problem more succinctly focused in the front. But any questions about this tool or how you might use it? All right. Those questions on that, if you will, and by the time we get together again in our, basically our Master Business Process 2, hopefully you're going to have, instead of notional data, you'll have actual data. And it's amazing if you start using these tools, and even to show it to folks, visually, and you can even start your interviews. Hey, here's kind of things we're starting with. Is this about right? Are there other things we haven't considered in here that need to be added into? And it maybe helps jumpstart the conversation, even when you're doing, showing the problem statement, when you do the interviews and looking at, here's the root causes. You talk about that. We're trying to discover that with this. There's a lot of different factors. Anything that's not on here, what would you add? Would you subtract? And it adds to the interaction, even when you're doing interviews or surveys, and you got something that you can start with as well. So there's techniques that you can use this with. And don't be afraid to have more than one Pareto and one fishbone diagram, and because you can use them in conjunction and say, okay, the root cause of that and the reason was this, and then it really gives you a fuller story. So it's kind of a flounder thing going on there. It's got, flat fish, got one eye up. So, all right. Anything else around the data collection we haven't covered? Any of the other concerns that we haven't talked about tonight?
Not really.
No, sir.
Right. One quick thing then. Let me, I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to do this because my screen's freezing up here, is your charter. I took a look at your charter. It looks like it's pretty good shape. And the dates are about right. You got the listing in med, you got time for your pilot, you got the briefing in there. But if you go back to your data collection dates that you had in your charter, okay, this is what I want you to, let's see. Let me know once your charter shows up on your screen. Can you see it?
It's there, sir.
Yeah. All right. So you got this here. This is going to be fairly aggressive. A lot of times in benchmarking, you'll do what they call secondary benchmarking first, which is going out and research on the web, data search engines, use of some of the tools we have for you online. But basically, it's anything in the public domain where you do research around your project and bring that information in. Sometimes you get a gold mine of information, maybe a better process, maybe a better ordering process, maybe a template for ordering that is better. And then if you have the opportunity, and this is where I really recommend, is that when you get the benchmarking as well, see if there's another unit or organization you can go find out how they do it. And then you're able then to find out what they level of training, maybe their best practices, and bring that in. A lot of times that's not your schedule, it's theirs that you have to try to match. So you may not be able to bring your benchmarking, and if you particularly do what they call primary benchmarking, which again you'll have next class, where you actually meet and greet, or you call up on the phone and talk to them directly, not just looking at their data, but have an opportunity. Sometimes that may go in a little bit later, so allow some time for that. Your cost of quality should be after your finance class, and I don't think you're having that one in October. So you may want to look at cost of quality, start looking at data that's relating to financials, but you'll probably understand a lot more what you need to go look for after you have your finance class. And I think it's going to be after the class you have with me, if I'm not mistaken. The piloting results, yeah, it's a pretty good time frame that you have in there with that. You learn from your pilot. Let's say you try out a new procedure about ordering parts, or maybe talk to some folks and got some training, improve that opportunity for them to do things right. And then you have an aircraft, which you're driving you guys and doing the pilot is what we just talked about. Airframes are in there getting maintained, and so that you can observe what parts are not happening, not available, and so it may be situational. So whenever that aircraft does go into that status, which are usually unannounced, right, because they break, and they're in there, is that you want to observe that as much as possible. So your pilot may be driven not by your academic schedule, but rather opportunity. So be sure that you're prepared to seize that if that does occur, or you may be looking at, scheduled maintenance and say, is there anything we can interpolate or extrapolate from those procedures about parts and things like that that'd be germane to our project. So think about how you're going to, go through that. And then March, when we do the final briefing, that's about right. Now, again, it's going to happen the first week in March, or first time we have our session. We'll have a big session. You'll do an initial brief, set up one with me, and then you go back to your champion. So allow for Murphy in here. Murphy will show up, be the sixth member of your team. And so like your data collection for here is probably going to be your most challenging one. So try to have as much results from what's on your data collection plan done, and then allow yourself, that this may fall into December, maybe other things you may be doing in with that, so that you're not off your critical path in doing it. So you've got a pretty good format in here. The other thing is, sometimes it's not a part of the template, but it's something that I do recommend you may want to include under 4.2, project sponsor and senior champion. What they're responsible for is in participating in progress reviews. You as a team should be meeting with the champion and having an opportunity, if you can all join in on that, it'd be through conference calls, or even if you can do a go-to meeting or something like that, with the champion. And so you just say, here's where we are, here's the data, get your feedback, and then you have that guidance that's kind of back and forth. So under 4.2, it's your call, but I do recommend that you maybe have, and they're part of the responsibilities to have regularly scheduled in-progress reviews with the team, and whether that's, it's not just through, Jay, but all of you, if you can, once a month or after every class, but that's a good rule of thumb. So, is the 2nd of October, you guys are planning on doing the signing of this document?
I think that's the date.
Okay. All right. So what you need to do, okay, and if that's going to happen, and then I'm looking over ahead at a high level, just look it over and look it over a little bit more in detail. If there's any major changes to this, I'll send it over to you. But what we'd like you to do then is that each one of you will sign this, okay? So leave a little room for your signature blocks here on this thing. You need to put the good Lieutenant Colonel's name, and he will sign here, right? And should have his name in there. And then I'll sign last. So you guys sign it, and the champion signs it. The senior champion's required. And then you fax it, scan it in, fax it to me, or email it in, scan it in. That'd probably be the third one. I'll sign it. Then you'll put this into your file. And if you do it on the 2nd, you'll be good to go. You have all your requirements for your charter done. And then with the non-disclosure will be also the same way with that. So get those things done. But if you would, send this to the champion ahead of time before signature so they can read it over, see if they've got any questions. If they want to talk with me about it, I'll be glad to do so. And if there's any issues at all that arise, because sometimes it does come up at the time we sign things, let me know. I'd be glad to talk with him or deal with you guys, and then we get whatever the issue is resolved. So that'll be part of the thing that would be uploaded into the portal once it's signed. And your signed document would have all the signatures. All right. All right. Let me see. Any other comments here as I kind of go through that? That's all I had for you tonight. What other comments or questions do you have?
I just have, do we have class tomorrow night too?
I can have class tomorrow night?
I don't think so. Other teams doing their mentoring session tomorrow.
Okay. No, there is no large session. This mentoring session takes the requirement of your large session. Now, what I'd like for you to do, though, before we bring this to closure, is that you guys go back and update your presentation based on what we talked about tonight in the comments I'll be sending to you. So what you should have before we bring this class to conclusion is a refined document. One thing that is missing, that is needed, that is not currently in your presentation, are operational definitions, okay? And last time I suggested that you take a look at things like, what does availability mean? Does that mean the part is physically at the site that the mechanics have? Is it physically available within 2 hours? Because what does late delivery mean? For instance, what does late mean? Does that mean 1 day late, 5 hours late, 5 minutes late? Wherever you got things in there, you need to probably define that in a way that makes sense to not only you, but the champion agrees to. And so operational definitions, you need to know the slide and need to cover things like what I just gave you examples on, things that you need to measure, and then that may be helpful. So that's one of the things that need to be added in that you completely don't have in your current set of slides. But no class in there. Do make the refinements. I'm going to give you feedback. I reviewed all your discussion questions and such, and root cause analysis. You'll get a grade on that. I'll send you feedback in the current document as well. Then we'll post that as well. So those are the requirements. Basically, is the refined deck gets in here. And then once between now and the next class, we have MBB2. Once you get signatures, I'll go into your thing. So let me just kind of go around the room. Let's say, Takalo, did you have any questions or comments at this point? You're on the web. I'm not sure if you have your audio on.
I'm good to go, sir.
Okay, good. Jay?
Which one, sir? Jahi or Judith?
Oh, Judith, why don't you go first?
I'm good, sir. Lots to think about, and revision is needed on everything.
That's good. I'm glad. That's part of the learning. Okay, thank you. Jay?
I think I got a lot out of this, so it gave me some different aspects of how to look at the data and how to look at the information that we did have, and it just helps us fine tune it more.
Okay. Any comments? Okay. All right, and Megan?
I'm good, sir. It was just a good mentoring session, taking away some good feedback for us to use within our presentation.
Okay. By the way, don't forget, after every class, please do an evaluation. The school's always interested in whether or not, what you liked, what you didn't like, and then what we can improve upon. So I encourage you all to do that. And let's see, Matthew. Okay. Well, folks, I think you're on track. I do, if I would summarize anything, go get the data you can, whatever's in electronic files, as soon as you can. And if you got any issues and not able to get to that, you figure out a strategy how we can either get the champion involved or look at alternate means. I mean, you may have to get more qualitative data from interviews and that type of thing about how long things take and what type of parts are missing. And it'd be good to collect that anyway, but actually having a database, and you can look at the fidelity of the database, how much information's in there, and you may even have comments on how to improve that system, but it should be used in a way that's going to be effective. So my comment to you, really have a bias to try to collect as much as you can, as quickly as you can, and share it amongst the group. You asked, Matthew, is there a question, is there a problem with benchmarking? You're going to have a class on that, so I'm not sure. Hold on. Okay. The only thing about benchmarking is that, one, often a lot of teams, in my experience, they get a good gain. They just go out and steal good ideas legally from other units, about how they did things, how they tackle it, other organizations, and you've got huge amount. If you look at it generically, they're going to tell you about the different types of benchmarking. One's generic. In other words, you look not within necessarily in the industry, but something very similar, like, well, Amazon stocks parts, right? They stock a lot of stuff, and they get it back out and delivered, if you're a Prime member like ours. So that may be a stretch, but that's thinking outside the box. It's outside the aircraft industry. But you'll find that, for instance, in my experience, particularly, folks that are in the Air Force, they know other folks at other sites that have similar issues, and you do those type of things. But you really want to look at those that perhaps you can learn from, best practices, and bring that in. So I'm not sure about the specific problem or question that Matthew had about benchmarking, but you're about to have a class. Dr. Jones is very good, and usually there's a great game, but that will be included next time we get together, the findings from your secondary research, which in there, and so that'd be part of the things we'll introduce into your slide deck you don't have currently. All right. I will stay on if anybody wants to entertain any further questions. That's all I have for you guys. So there is no more sessions. You've met the mentoring requirement, and please make the refinements, and I'll give you, review that. If you're off the mark, I'll let you know. But so far, I think you're tracking where you need to be.
Okay. Roger that, sir. Good night.
Thank you, sir. Good night.
All right.
Thank you, sir.
Good night.
All right.